Welcome, everyone, to the next edition of our Mediate.com book club. I'm delighted to be here with all of you, and we are recording this for posterity so we can circulate it widely. I'm very excited today to have Hesha Abrams here with us talking about her wonderful book, Holding the Calm. And thank you, John, for hosting the discussion today. So why don't we kick it off? John, why don't I hand it to you to get us going?
Sure. Thank you very much, Colin. Happy to be here, and thanks for having us. But I'll kick it off with a question to Hesha just to get everybody introduced. And that's Hesha. Look, I know that you're one of the go-to mediators out there for disputes among well-known brands and personalities, often with nine figures, political positions, and more at stake. But can you tell us a little bit more about how you got here?
Sure. I feel like I should have a business card that says can handle difficult personalities and big egos. Because, that's the nature of it. And I joke, especially in our mediation community. I mean, I may deal with $1 billion pharma case with, some difficult person wearing a $10,000 suit and a $40,000 watch. And it's the same thing as a small claims case where whose roommate's cat peed on the rug. It's just bumper car egos. And so I've been doing this now at 35, 36 years, long time. And I've done every kind of conceivable case. And now I just do the big monsters, which are fun because, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And then it forces me to be clever and to be creative and to be different, because you're not going to settle. Win-win problem solving does not work with those guys. There's no win-win problem solving to the Super Bowl. They don't care. That's not what they're interested in and what they want. So being able to handle that. And then at the same time, I've done giant communities that were being ripped apart by some political issue or something. And one of the things I want to talk about with our mediation community here is sort of permission to make stuff up. When you're, like Pablo Picasso says, you have to know the rules to know how to break them properly. And so once you've done, probably 400 or 500 mediations, and you've got your style and you've got your structure and you know how to do it, okay, now you've got reckless abandon to the guinea pigs that voluntarily come within your orbit. And then you make stuff up because you do it for the people at your table. It's personalized medicine in the law. And that's one of the things I really want to talk about today.
Awesome. Well, that gets us started. And and I see the book over your shoulder, Holding the Calm. And I've read this. I've read this book a couple of times. I probably should only admit to having read it twice, although it's actually more than that. But I am curious, what inspired you to write this? Why step away from some of the biggest cases and sit down to write to share it with everybody else?
Well, I appreciate you asking that. And first of all, I appreciate your insights and comments, because you were one of the first people that I sent a draft to, because when I wrote it, I don't know if it was any good. And we all have to have healthy egos to do this work. But my ego wasn't so big that I thought, oh, this is great just because I wrote it. It could have been garbage. And so I sent it to a very small group of friends and people that I respected. And I said, honest, tell me, is this good enough? Should I go through the work and time and effort of getting this out in the world? And I got back unanimous, you must get this out there. It's too important. And that's why, the work, as you say, is extraordinary. So I've given, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say I've given more than 10,000 speeches in my career. And I like motivating and inspiring people to be more, be better, learn from some of the stuff if I can be helpful. And 2 years ago, I had a hysterectomy, and, knock on wood, no problem, turned out fine, but I was grounded for 6 weeks. First time in my life I was ever literally grounded for 6 weeks. And I thought, well, I'm going to just write this book. It poured out of me. Like literally, it was like a cow that needed to be milked, which is probably not a very PC thing to say, but I'm a woman, so I can get away with it. It just poured out of me. And what I wanted to do, and initially this is for our mediation group, as I originally called it mediation magic. And it was really something for us, for lawyers, for mediators, for community professionals, our world. But I wrote it very accessible, because I find, 11 o'clock at night, I'm with some big CEO, and what we're talking about? His ex-wife or his idiot sister-in-law that he can't handle, or someone's, jerk at work that they can't deal with. So everyone wanted, how do I handle that? How do I deal with that? So I tried to make the book easy and accessible. And I didn't want to do another book of philosophy. There's a lot of them out there. ideas and philosophy. I wanted it to be a boots on the ground, hard nailed. I mean, I am in the trenches of human conflict. I've got blood and guts on my boots, real live, hard stuff. And I wanted to write, what are techniques? What are tactics? What are tools? What are things you can do in a given situation to improve it, to help it work and make it better along the way? And that's what I did. It's 20 tools in 20 chapters. Each chapter has a bunch of stories and anecdotes and things. And what I tell people is that, the Bible, the Torah, the Bhagavad Gita, the Buddhist Dharmasalas, the Book of Mormon, I mean, every religion, the Quran teaches in stories. And why? Because I can tell you, well, it's important that you do this because of the, and our brain goes, yeah, right. You give me a story, it locks in there. And so I've developed stories over the years that work for certain things. So if I'm trying to tell someone this, or I'm trying, for example, I've got a book about how to be the adult in the room, how to be the grown-up. You don't say, well, come on, everybody, like a school marm. It's time that we need to be mature and listen to each other. Like, Jesus Christ, like, no way. But I'll tell the story. And I've got this great story about a ram. And then people just kind of go, I don't say another word. And they get it viscerally. That's what I wanted to put in the book. And I want people to take my stories. They're battle tested. They work. Take them, use them. And that's really what I wanted this to be, was a toolkit, a how-to manual. And then I had wonderful friends like my friend John DeGroote here, who then said, well, I didn't understand this. How do we sharpen that? And what did you mean by this? And just made it better and sharper so that it's immediately usable. That's what I wanted. And I'm hoping I achieved that.
Well, if not understanding everything I read is a help to people, then I'm going to be a lot of help to a lot of people, but that's neither here nor there. So I will go, though. Those stories really do bring the concrete points home, and there are ways to remember them, hooks to hang those ideas on, if you will. Is there a story out there that most people come back to you and say, this is the story that I remember? Is there one that sort of dominates all?
I love the question, because no, and I thought it would be. Here it is, I'm this expert in people, and I know neuroscience, and I move chess people around the board, chess boards, and what I have to do. And I for sure thought that was going to be the case. They'll be my top 3 or 4 stories. It's not the case. Everybody has different stories that they like, and people go, oh, that one was stupid, you should get rid of that. And someone else will go, that was my favorite one. And there's one particular story that my publisher just hated. And I put it right in the preface, right in the front and center in the book, about President Teddy Roosevelt and a way that he saved, his campaign manager saved the campaign from financial ruin. And my publisher hated it because it's a little manipulative. So he absolutely hated it. And I said, but this is a book for carnivores. We're not preaching to the choir here. This is a book for real people in real situations that want to win, that want to defend themselves. It's got to be both a sword and a shield. And I convinced him why I had to keep it in. And I've got a friend who's a big shot, type A personality, big guy at one of the big companies that you would know. And he read it and said, well, there's a lot of touchy-feely crap in there, but I like that story. So my goal is it's like Mr. Baskin and Mrs. Robbins, 32 flavors. You choose your flavor.
Well, of all those stories, I'm thinking through them from having read the book. Which one's your favorite?
Oh, that's a great question. I love the story where I did suicide crisis counseling, because that's what taught me how to listen. I've done suicide crisis counseling. I've done, chaplaincy work in a hospital. I've done hospice work. I've helped people die. And I would say this to everyone listening, if you want to get rid of your fear of death, go volunteer for hospice. It is one of the most magnificent things I've done in my life. The training is deep, and you have got to confront a lot of your own stuff because you can't help someone else. And then that's where the rubber meets the road. Someone's dying. And it's usually not that person. It's usually the family that's flipping out that you got to deal with. And then how to help that person. It was amazing. And when I took that training and I took the suicide crisis training, and I was young and cocky and arrogant. I'm probably still young and cocky and arrogant. And I took their little 2-week training on listening, of course, and didn't listen because I was a lawyer. I was smarter. I knew what I was doing. Yeah, just move on. Give me to the phones. Let me do my great magic. And this little old woman, I got off the phone call, and one phone call, and I'm helping this woman who had just a messed up, crazy life, terrible. I spent an hour fixing it, coming up with a game plan, giving her resources. Man, I got off that phone and I was very self-satisfied. And she marched up to me and went, "You're doing it wrong." I went, "Moi? Moi? How could that possibly be?" And then she patiently sat and taught me what I hadn't learned in the whole session, that by my helping her, all I had done was prove to her that I was smarter than her, that I had my life together. She felt worse. She felt more incompetent. She felt more unable to do anything. I didn't lift her up by being, coming up with a plan for her. I actually had put her down. And it completely changed the way I operate, completely changed the way I listen and how I interact. It was some awesome stuff. And I've had a lot of people comment that they like that story. And so I would tell anybody here, you want to improve your skill set quick and don't have to take some master class somewhere, you go volunteer for suicide crisis phone work. You'll usually get to take a training. You'll work a 4-hour shift a month or 2. It's like easy to do. They give you a fake name because they don't want people to be able to track you. And then the hospice work, it takes your, like, people will tell me that I just get them and they can't tell you why. And I think it's because when you battle your own demons, you create a depth within yourself that people they just get it and they resonate with it. And then you can do all kinds of cool magic stuff at a mediation table. That's why we're also lucky to do this work, aren't we?
We definitely are. And on your topic of listening, by the way, I'll just throw in one takeaway that I got that I use in every mediation now is when I leave a room, I ask a question that you said to ask in that book, which is, I know you heard what was said, but did you hear what wasn't said? And I asked that question time and time again, is what did I not hear when I was in there? And that actually gives me, it's like turning the sock inside out, but it really, really makes a difference to me just on the ground. So anyway,
I'm so glad it works.
Yeah, it really does.
It really does work. And it works also because there's a lot of things I talk about in the book about neuroscience. I read every book I can get my hands on, and I attend TED Talks and lectures, and I listen because how human beings listen and how they hear. And with 3 decades of doing this, I'll tell you, you take the same human beings, you take the same facts, you change the human beings, you got a different game every single time. And so, John, can I use my little banana example with that?
Sure.
So bananas, 25 cents each. How many would you buy? I don't know. I like bananas. I buy a couple. Bananas, 4 for $1, 35% boost in sales. Now that's just illogical and stupid. And those 2 extra bananas will probably rot in your fridge, but it doesn't matter. Want an extra 10% boost in sales? Limit 2. Not going to let that guy get my bananas. And it's a fascinating, the neuroscience of how human beings decide things, how we know when to hold them, when to fold them, what our confirmation bias is, what reciprocity bias is. It's the difference with why somebody can work with people and somebody can't. I never wanted to be, the operation was a success, but the patient died. I'm like, no, I'm too goal oriented for them. I want to get to a goal. And what else can I learn? What else can I do to make me better able to get to that goal? And like I said, I've been doing this over 3 decades. I'm 64 years old. I figure by the time I'm 74, I might actually be good at this.
I like that. As a mediator, I think, and as mediators, I think often we're looking for the big idea. Look, it's late in the afternoon. I need to do something to catalyze a deal here. And, but step back just a little bit. In the book, you talk about how little words sometimes make the difference. Words like we and you can make a huge difference. Set aside the big idea for the minute. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, plural pronouns are just something I discovered on my own. And because I was reading a book on neuroscience. And now, they put electrodes all over you and shove you in an MRI and they can see what lights up in the brain. And, it's very interesting that for some people, stress actually lights up the pleasure centers of the brain. And that's because they grew up in a tough place or their life is tough. And they're so habituated to things being difficult, they actually look for it and they actually want it. And so one of the things they have also discovered is we are literally wired as cavemen and cavewomen for the Hatfields and the McCoys, for the us versus them. Our brains are literally wired that way. And so we're looking for friend or foe. And then if we see that and that's a thin line, you're friend or foe, you're done. Now you're on the other side. I can't talk to you anymore. I don't listen to you anymore. You have no credibility. There's no value to anything you have to say. And it becomes very difficult. So just something simple, like when you're in the mediation room saying, let's say I have to bring over a ridiculous proposal. How are we going to respond to that? I know it's ridiculous. How are we going to respond to that? As opposed to, well, what do you want to do? Just that simple little nothing creates a difference. It just reduces the tension level in the room just a little bit. And if I want to talk about them, instead of calling them, I may say, well, how do we want to handle Carla and Mike? Just that simple little thing. It literally changes the brain chemicals in the brain. And as a mediator, as much as we can take the problem and put it in the center of the table, and we are around the table, it creates a subtle team building that it's us against the problem, as opposed to me against you. Me against you, you won't, it all becomes a power imbalance. And it becomes this, you're trying to make me do, think, or say something I don't want. Or I'm trying to make you do, think, or say something you don't want. And so we're just going to push against each other. Well, why are we playing that game? We just stop playing that game. We just don't need to. And one of the quick, and yes, listening and reflective feedback and all that cool stuff, yes. But I want to give people easy, quick things that we can do. Plural pronouns. Practice it. You will be shocked how it just reduces the tension in the room and it dissipates somewhat that us versus them mentality. And then it's almost like being equally on everybody's side, because I'm on the side of a solution. I stand for the proposition that peace is better than war. I stand for the proposition that creating your own solution is better than conflict. And we all know that the vast majority of cases will settle before trial. They just have to get beaten up before. Why? Why do we have to accept that, child mortality rates in the 1700 was 50%? That's why people had 9 and 10 kids. I mean, that, and of course, no birth control. But, that was just literally considered, well, that was the norm. You had like 9 or 10, and, maybe you had 3 that made it to adulthood. Scientists said, no, there's got to be a better way. I like to do that with us because we are the legal, even if you're not a lawyer, it doesn't matter. We're the legal civilizing force in the healing of human conflict. So we are like the ER doctors. We are the physicians of interpersonal relationships. And anything we can do, sometimes you can do big, glorious, lovely healings, which is just extraordinary. And that's like 10% of the time. 90% of the time you get a cold peace, but you solve the conflict and you stop the war. Okay, I can live with that, because some people don't want a lovey, touchy-feely, understanding thing. Okay, but I want the deal done. And so plural pronouns, they're your friend.
I like that. Well, and this goes now to sort of that later in the afternoon. Sometimes there's good news, sometimes there's bad news, but sometimes there's just real bad news that has to be delivered in the room. And as you walk from one room to the next, and you're thinking, how am I going to package this? What's the best way to do it?
See, that's a lovely question. And what I would say is it is depend on, who you're feeding. Are you putting food into a baby bird's mouth or an alligator's mouth? It depends on how you're going to deliver that food and what you're going to do, right? So sometimes I just deliver it because it's a cut and dried person, or they knew it was going to be stupid. And I said, let's get the stupid ones out of the way. Let's just get, they have to say it. There's an ego thing. The lawyer needs to stand up in front of his client. Let's just dismiss it as stupidity. And I just literally wipe it away. Other times I may go in and I know they're going to be mad. They're going to be really aggravated. And the last thing I want is to have something blow up and have them walk out. I mean, I keep people at my table. I don't let them leave and what we agree to leave, but you keep them there because just because they get angry, they'll calm down too, you know? So what I may do, and this is a really interesting technique, is I may tell them I don't want to tell them until where they literally are begging me to tell them. I may walk in and say, oh, that was brutal. That was brutal. They are just not seeing it. They're not seeing the risk. They're not seeing it the way you're seeing it. And they gave me such an idiotic offer. I don't want to give it to you. It's just going to make you too mad. I don't want to do it. Please give us the offer. No. What's the point of doing it? It's just going to aggravate you and annoy you. Within 2 or 3 minutes, they're like, please give me the offer. And so by the time I give it to them, the toxicity of it has drained down more than half to where they go, oh, you were right. That really is stupid. So now the question is, how are we going to respond? How are we going to handle it? See how those dovetail so nicely? Try that one, everyone. It's fun. And then just the other piece too, it makes it more of a game for you because again, you're an emergency room doctor. You can't get burnt out. And think about how many mediators we know who've been doing this a long time. And sometimes they're dialing it in and they're just, kind of burnt out. And I'm not burnt out. And I think it's because I see the game of it. I mean, this is a bit of a game. How can I be of the most service to somebody? How can I help them see something they need to do? How can I get something done that a whole bunch of people have tried and failed? Well, I'm not smarter than them. How am I going to figure that out? What else am I going to do? Oh, because I understand people. I have tricks. I have holding the calm tools. I can move around an alligator pit and not have it bite my hand off because I know how to do that. Or I'll tell a story, or I'll use sentence stems. And in the book, I have tons of sentence stems. And I literally tell people memorize them or take a Post-it note, and write 4 or 5 of them on it, stick it on your portfolio where only you can see. So when you get stumped, go, I don't know what to say here. I mean, I feel like we might be at an impasse and I don't know what to do. You look at your sentence stems and they restart conversations. And I'd almost want to do a show of hands for everybody that's, on here. How many people have had a case where somebody said, I'll never do that. And they do it, right? I'll never pay that much. And they do it. Or I'd never take that little. And they do it. You just can't listen during the venting, vomiting, angry part of it. You hold the calm. You keep your cool. And that was a long answer to a short question, John. I'm sorry.
No, I like that. I like that answer, and that's helpful. And holding the calm, I mean, it's embedded in the title, but throughout the book, you talk about different ways when the pressure is put directly on the mediator. And perhaps they sort of transferred their annoyance or their anger from the other side to you, because you're supposed to be the one that can get it done, Hesha. And it's 4 o'clock and we haven't moved at all. And I'm going to get angry at you.
Right.
And so it's easy to be triggered. And so let's talk about a technique or two, not all of them, but a technique or two that you use to step back and avoid being triggered.
That is wonderful also, because you're human. You got, you can get triggered too. And I'm not going to go into it now because we don't have time, but on my website, holdingthecalm.com, I've given tons of webinars and trainings and interviews. And in most of them, I talk about the amygdala and I go through the fight or flight response. The amygdala is the reptilian brain back here, just above the brainstem. And it's about a 20-minute discussion. So I'll leave that for anyone's interested in that to go to holdingthecalm.com. And I've got that for you to learn and understand. But the summary of it is that your amygdala gets triggered and you yourself can go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. And so one is you can't allow yourself to as best you can because you're servant leadership. The doctor can't get mad that he's got both the murderer and the person he shot in the room, and they got to go deal with the murderer. Just imagine when John F. Kennedy was shot and, the guy who shot him was in the next bed and the ER doctors are feverishly working to save his life. We're ER docs, just of the law. That's what we're doing. So first is you got to work on your own amygdala and have tricks that what I do is, the emotions are right here. When you get angry, when you get upset, you're kind of gripped like this. I'm a big believer in creating a moat and a space between my emotions and me. I know, John, you like to use Yuri's, go up onto the balcony. Whatever analogy works for you, you do something to give yourself some space. And what I have found is that I use holding the calm like a mantra because it works in 3 seconds. I literally will say, I'm holding the calm, I'm holding the calm, I'm holding the calm. It's a trigger to my amygdala that says, you're not powerless. You got options, you got choices, you got things that you can do. So it gives you that option and opportunity to have some space. And I'll literally, just trust me, guys, say, I'm holding the calm 3 times in 3 seconds. You can feel your respiration go down a little bit. You can feel the grip that happens to you. Now I have a choice on how I choose to respond. What do I choose to say? How do I choose to want to look at it? So that's the basic stuff. But let's answer your question for the advanced class, because these are all mediators, right? So let's do the advanced class. How many people have come back after first caucus and your second caucus with the first side, and then they look up at you and go, hey, Hesha, did you get it settled yet? Right? And you want to kind of go, jackass, but you can't, right? So I'm going to give you the thing that works every single time. I'll look at them and I'll say, well, human gestation takes 9 months. Gestation for an elephant is 2.5 years. What are we birthing here? And I don't know if it's just the birth analogy makes people queasy or the elephant thing, or that it's funny, but I'm telling you, it works every time. And it settles the person down to where they don't feel attacked. They don't feel challenged. But what does it do for you as the mediator? You just asserted power. You just asserted control. If you allow someone to knock you down, all you're really doing is making them think, well, if you're not effective with us, how are you effective with them? Like, it just takes the whole credibility away from you. So you've got to maintain that I'm in charge of the process here, and we're going to do this well. And I'm not going to let any of us get knocked off track. So try that as a technique. I've got some others in the book. One of my favorites is to vuck. And I think you will all not forget that now. I've made up that analogy purposely. So when someone is difficult, you vuck them, or you tell them to go vuck themselves, although really you have to be the one to do it. Validate, understand, clarify, summarize. VUCS. You tell them to vuck them. Now, you're not going to forget that because I created an icon for it in your brain. And the first step is validate. So again, let's do the advanced class here. If you can validate, obviously you will. But let's say you can't validate. The person's obnoxious. He just made a racist comment. She made an anti-Semitic comment or an anti-gay comment or something just so nasty that it took your breath away. And you're not sure how you should respond to that. So the part of validation, part of the V for validation, is to name the emotion. So I may look at somebody and say, wow, you seem really angry. I'm not angry, I'm frustrated. Okay, you're frustrated. I just got a data point. I understand how you can be so frustrated, but tell me why it's that upsetting to you. Do you have somewhere you have to go? Is this taking too long? No, I'm just impatient and I'm angry. Well, you have been dealing with this a long time. I can see how that would be very frustrating. And the other stories I use and I offer to all of you, I will tell people that litigation is like a root canal without anesthesia or a colonoscopy without anesthesia. Choose your end.
Oh.
And what happens? Everybody laughs, tension dissipates. And now I could say, now you have to have some patience with the process and you have to make sure, I mean, how well is that going to work for you? But if you use that analogy, works every time, guys, works every time. And then they calm down. You don't have to say, this is a process. We have to be patient. We have to let it work. You don't have to say any of that junk because that's not satiating the amygdala. That's not making the amygdala feel better. And that's really when people get angry or upset. And what they have found, just to give you patience, is that when they shove people in MRIs and they get them all activated and crazed and the brain, lights up with stuff, you know how long it lasts? It's called a refractory state. last 20 minutes. Isn't that fascinating?
Hmm.
As angry as you want to get, as upset as you want to get, last 20 minutes. So during that 20 minutes, why are you trying to give them data and analysis and information to help change where they're going? They're not hearing a doggone thing you're saying. In fact, they're shutting it down and thinking that you're an idiot because you don't get why they're so upset. 20 minutes, so you stop, you validate them, you vux them, you do all of this stuff so that that refractory state can pass. They don't feel so out of control or out of power. Now you can do something, pretty cool stuff, isn't it? Thanks for asking that, John.
Good. I love that. And I know that I looked at the time, and I know that Colin had some questions he wanted to raise.
Absolutely. And these are extremely experienced mediators here on this call. So I think everybody has opinions about what you're sharing. But John, thank you for asking those questions. I mean, Hesha, I have to say, you're a force of nature. Like, I am just completely captivated by your presentation here. And I've seen book clubs and presentations and conferences. It's amazing. So I just bought the book. I mean, I got to hear your stories. I think this is amazing. And I want to hear, I think part of me just wants to spend the rest of the time having you tell stories about some of your most exciting cases. But Dick, I see you got your hand up. What do you want to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I really love Hesha's presentation and what she talks about. I love neuroscience. I'm just wondering how transparent we should be, or can we be, with people as to the neuroscience that we know. I mean, in other words, the 20-minute thing. Should we just, that's enough. You understand the question.
It's a great question, because I tried, it's an interesting thing. I remember years and years and years ago, I took NLP training because I thought this would be a cool thing. Mm-hmm. And then I stopped using it after 3 or 4 months because it felt very manipulative to me. And I didn't like how I felt about it. And I'd rather do the work with skill than manipulative techniques. So I didn't like that. I don't view neuroscience that way. I view that as science. And if somebody is falling in love or falling into hate, do I want to explain to them the neuroscience of why the love poem works or why the rant works, or I just want to help them? That's kind of how I look at it. Now, there may be a time when someone's upset and I can say to them, it's a refractory state of the last 20 minutes. But think about it. When you're in that refractory state, you're more likely to go, screw you. Who the hell are you? What are you doing? Psychoanalyzing me? You're not helping them. So and when I go to a doctor, I just necessarily want him to fix my knee. I don't need him to give me an anatomy lesson about the cartilage, whatever. So I personally tend to come from the servant leadership place, and I tell people what they need to know. But my overarching goal is that you have 100% of me in that moment in full servant leadership. How can I help you? And if the number one problem in your life is the stress and anxiety and misery of this conflict, why don't we help make that go away? And there's times I will say that to somebody. Someone's upset and they want to discuss some philosophical whatever. And I may say, we could do that if you think that's a good use of our time. I just know how stressful this is for you. Why don't we focus on trying to make it go away and getting it done? And you will literally have people almost purr, like that. It's truly amazing, And here's a story that I will tell people, though, and I offer it to you. I use this a lot, and people love this analogy. If you look at the book, here, let me pull over here. Originally I just wanted to call it Holding the Calm, the Secret to Resolving Conflict. That's nice and short. And then I added, and diffusing tension, which makes the sentence freaking long, right? And I was really hesitant to do that, except that all conflict, 100% of conflict starts with tension. Every single time, even if it's that, okay? Every single time. And what happens is that we don't see it, or we don't know how to deal with it. And we hope and prayer that it's just going to go away. And it doesn't. It just rots like nuts for the winter and just gets worse and worse and worse and becomes conflict. So what I tell people is, if you've ever dripped spaghetti sauce on your counter, you can just wipe it up with a sponge, right? If you do it right away, leave it overnight, you're scraping it off with a spatula. Leave it 3 or 4 months, it's old and moldy and nasty. That, my friends, is conflict. And we don't do it early enough. So when it's easy, and that's one of the reasons I wrote the book the way I did, is that I want us to be able to handle stuff early and easy and not be afraid of it. And if you can't, some things just have to percolate. Sometimes people have to be beaten up. You know, lifeguards have to let a person have drown before they scoop in and try to save them so they don't drown them. You know, you deal with the hand you're dealt. But that spaghetti analogy, when you're thinking, Richard, like neuroscience, what do I say, what do I don't? Use that analogy with people. They all interpret it slightly differently, but I'm telling you 100% of the time, you'll get a, and it just is very satiating, you know? And you also don't want to say to somebody, you waited too long. You should have handled this better. You know, you didn't file by the deadline. You know, why did you wait so long? There's like a statute of limitations argument or a latches or something, and blaming, who knows why they waited. I don't even care, you know, except it's a data point on how a judge may rule or not. But I tell them the spaghetti sauce story and they just kind of go, I waited too long. Okay, what do I care? Now let's try to get you out of the thorny thicket into the happy meadow.
I like that. From the thorny thicket into the happy meadow. One question I have for you, all my training in conflict resolution has been from social psychologists, you know, and I think the neurology stuff is interesting to me, and I've had insights from some of those presentations. But to me, what's really interesting is this experiential, you know, where you go in and you look at, exactly as you say, people, we like to think that we're purely rational beings, but social psychology demonstrates how programmable we are. And Jim Malamed has said to me many times, mediation is benevolent manipulation. But you can't tip your cards. You know, you can't show that you're manipulating people. But I think these stories, I love the way, but one of the questions I had for you is, what do you think about transformative mediation?
Oh, I love it. I love it. In the right circumstance, I'm actually friends with a woman named Cindy Halberlin, who actually created the entire postal service program.
Yeah.
And so years ago, when it first came out, I'm honest, I looked at, I was a hard-nosed litigator, you know, who had become a mediator. I thought it was ridiculous. I thought it was stupid. You're going to sit and talk and there's no goal. You're going to have to try to get to an achievable result. What is wrong with you? Like, it just seemed very stupid. The last chapter in the book is all about that. And what had happened is I was having a conversation at a conference where I was keynoting with another woman about that. And I was admitting that I was totally and completely wrong, that now, I mean, once they went through transformative mediation, we used to say going postal all the time. This younger generation doesn't even know what that word means anymore. And that's because the Postal Service did this transformative mediation stuff where there's no goal. We don't have to get to a resolution. We don't have to identify anything. You can still have your grievance. It doesn't matter. Not a single US Post Office was shot up. Not one, not one. It was brilliant. And then, so I said it to this person, we've got to find out who had the guts, literally the guts, to see the vision of it, ramrod it through a government agency, get funding, and all the negativity that person must have done. And we found Cindy, and since then, she and I become very close friends. She is a magnificent person, and she's told me some of the secret behind the scenes stuff. Like, people were so against it because they were afraid it was going to work. And it would get them out of jobs. It would get them out of, like, the head union guy. So I don't want this. It'll put me out of a job. I mean, that what she had to do and how she figured out how to get the ducks in a row to make it actually happen. She's brilliant as far as I'm concerned, and I'm super impressed with her. And if we did that, can you imagine what our schools would be? Right now, our schools are all about catching you doing it wrong. That's what testing is all about. We don't ever catch you doing it right. And what would happen if our schools, you know, like, I love NAME, the National Association for Mediation and Education. Brilliant. The concept is that I want to look at kids and identify their superpowers. What are their gifts? How do I flourish that up? What a different environment and a change it would be. And then I'll get a little heavy here for just a moment, but all these mass shootings that we have, well, it's wrong to call them mass shootings because they're murders. That's what they are. And only 2 or 3 people got killed. It's not that such a big a deal because it's not 12. Oh, for God's sakes, it's horrific. And we're all numb to it. And that guy, Uvalde, I don't even want to use, he doesn't deserve to even have his name used. He shot his grandmother in the face. So tell me about that relationship, right? So I look at that and I see all of these basically angry young men, that how many people touch them along the way, from a coach to a teacher to a cash register person at the grocery store to anybody along the way. And nowhere along the way was that guy given my supposition, given any human kindness, given a pass, given some grace. His life was tough and hard and mean and nasty. And he went, okay, fine. And he vomited off on all the rest of us. I think that's true for all of these people, even the guy that was in his 50s in Denver or Colorado, who shot, killed all those people at the music festival. There's no off-gassing valve. I'm angry, I'm hurt, I'm humiliated, I'm miserable, and it builds and builds and builds and builds and builds until someone rationalizes whatever their actions are and they go crazy and it harms all the rest of us. So this is my story and I'm sticking to it. And when I'm promoting the book, I'm doing 3-4 speeches a week, I'm doing webinars, I'm doing all this keynoting conferences. And what I'm saying to people is, let's throw kindness around like confetti, especially to people who don't deserve it, especially to them. Maybe we can shift that asteroid just a couple of inches and a mass shooting won't happen. And we'll never know that, obviously. But that's what I'm just choosing to do, because I can't do nothing. I have to feel like I'm doing something. And so I'm hoping with this book, I'm doing a lot of pro bono stuff. I'm trying to go into some inner city schools because people don't have tools. They have one trick and they try it and it doesn't work. Well, you're just a jerk. No one can deal with you. You're a narcissist. You're a sociopath. You're a fill in the blank. Well, there's nothing that can be done there. And if I can add one more quick thing to this, I have a antidote to the poison. So you have an amygdala. Let's say you have to deal with someone and go, ugh, that person it's impossible for me to deal with. You stop, see, I'm holding the calm, and you look at them and you say, one question: would they pull my kid out of a burning car? 95% of the time, the answer to that will be yes. So then that means there's something redemptive about them, right? Do I have to wait till they pull my kid out of the burning car? Now I can look at them with those eyes. I'll see more. I'll understand more. I won't be as blocked. It's a trick. I use it myself. And it's another way of getting you back in the groove when you're having to look at somebody who's being really difficult. And people are difficult for all kinds of reasons. I'm not a shrink. I don't have to psychoanalyze them. I don't have time. You're at my table for this limited period of time. I got to deal with you and then we got to move on.
That's great. That's great. Anybody else have comments or questions for Hesha? I certainly have more than I'd like to raise. Yeah, one of the other things that is very interesting for me in my practice is dealing with high conflict personalities. That's Bill Eddy's frame. Yeah. And, Bill Urey wrote a book about, dealing with difficult people. And, sometimes I just encounter people who they say the sky is green. And you're like, the sky, look at the sky. And they don't even look at you. They look at you, they say, the sky is green. And it's almost like a badge of honor that they will not listen. And I think it's interesting when you talk about holding the calm. I think it's a really great summary of what does it mean to be a mediator? What does it mean to be a peacemaker? But when you encounter somebody like that, what are some of the techniques that you use? Not only for, maintaining your own neutrality, which is a tricky thing in a situation like that, but also, trying to crack the shell.
Yeah. And that's really it. Look, we all have to deal with that, right? That's the biggest thing. So, and Bill Eddy's work on high conflict individuals is interesting. I like it. He does more family stuff and I do more business stuff. And so it's just the level of the shell and how hard it is. And if you get too touchy-feely with people, like I want to hear you, I want to listen to you, you can become decredibilized in their eyes. That only works with certain people. Yeah. With others, they look at you like, namby-pamby sissy, you're not going to be helpful to me. And then they dismiss you, which is the worst thing that can possibly happen. Well, you
told that story about the guy who said, I got a lot of touchy-feely kumbaya stuff here, but I like that shield and sword analogy. And you have in your book, you say, leave them with their sword. Like I was wondering what that you mean by that, but you're dealing with some pretty type A people in these cases. Yeah.
Indeed. So. Yeah. And I will say that even if someone's not a type A normally, put them in conflict. You will see them at their worst, right? So this is again, I'm the analogy queen here. Let me give you another analogy. I'm an ER doc. Somebody comes in, oh, doc, my stomach hurts, blah, and they vomit. Now, all the rest of us will go, oh, gross. I don't like the smell, right? Not the ER doc. She looks at it. What's in there? Does it smell right? Look right? Does it have metal? Does it have undigested pills? What's going on there? It's a diagnostic technique for her. When we get people with high emotionality, I think of it as they're in the ER room and they're vomiting. And I think of it, first of all, if I get any trigger at all, because I'm human too, I'm holding the calm, I'm holding the calm, I'm holding the calm, and I create some space for myself. Now I look at you as a patient. You just vomited. Now I want to know why. I want to understand it more. So if the sky is green instead of it's blue, well, you have a self-interest in the sky being green. Okay, I want to know more about that. Why? Because I'm not going to convince you that it's blue. And getting into power struggle with you is not going to work. I'm not going to be able to do that. So now I want to understand why. And the more I listen and the more I vox them, validate, understand, clarify, summarize, the more I understand where they're coming from. People are not sociopaths. They're not psychotic morons. There's usually a reason. Now I can disagree with it. I can think you're connecting the dots in the wrong way. I can think you're listening to the wrong people, but you're not usually a moron. So there's a connecting of the dots to where remember the question John asked me, about the us versus them, the we kind of a thing. It's very much that people are tribal. And I have to be part of my tribe because this is my identity. And in my tribe, we believe that the sky is green. So you're the idiot because I have confirmation bias because everyone around me and my newscasters and everyone else is telling me the sky is green. So the emperor has no clothes. Okay, because I want to be part of that club or that team or that group. You will never change someone's mind, ever. But you can help understand where they are, why they are. And then how to identify self-interest. And identify self-interest, and then I align those suckers. You don't have to like each other at all. You can have a cold peace. I don't care, but I want to align that self-interest. And it doesn't always happen. You try as best you can. And then what I suggest everyone does, at least what I do after every single matter, I do a forensic on myself. If it went great, I still do a forensic. How could it have been better? How could I have seen that quicker? How could I have anticipated that? If it goes more rocky, what didn't I try? I should have tried that. Why didn't I do that? So I do a forensic every single time because for my own skill set development, I want to be sharper. I want to be better. Each time I do it, I get better and better and better. And I think for all of you as mediators, if you commit to that for yourself, forget them, forget the guinea pigs in your laboratory. Do it for you. You won't burn out and you'll enjoy your job more. And then you'll just get better and better and better at it. And yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, I don't want to step on anybody if they want to make comments or ask questions, but do you ever co-mediate?
Rarely. There would have to be a really good reason to do it. When I was younger, I did. And I found people just kind of stepping over each other's toes and it became harder. So I like to do everything for a reason. I don't like to have a protocol that, well, this is just the way we do it. I just hate that, I also don't like the sentence, well, that's just the way I was raised. I just think that's just such a cop-out. Like you're raised a certain way as an adult, you now go, do I want those programs or not? I choose to accept them. I choose to delete them. And part of it is I came from a really challenging upbringing and a lot of difficulty, and I've done a lot of therapy. So this wisdom has been earned, pain by pain. And so I really try to look at it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason why I ask is because, I've done both. I'm a talker, and I think that's my challenge in mediation. Sometimes I have to shut up. And I think it's interesting when I've been paired with mediators who are like me, we step on each other's toes. But I've worked with mediators who are not like me, who are very, very quiet, they have a very different energy in the room. And it's interesting when you talk about that debrief. It's really helpful to have somebody, particularly it takes a very different approach than you take to say, well, what was going on there? What was happening? I've done an interview series with married mediators, and that's very interesting too, because, they can really read each other in the room. So they know who's going to step in and who's going to step away. But I don't know, it's an interesting one too, in terms of understanding your own styles to give you that reflection. So.
It's interesting. There's one case that I might actually be doing. I was just having this conversation with someone where it's big, it's multi-billion-dollar huge.
Mhm.
And one side really wanted a former judge. And the former judge, has creds, but, isn't as great as a mediator or great at reading people and knowing how to do it. And they asked me if I
Mediate with a gavel. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. And would I co-mediate with, and I said, well, first I got to talk to him. I got to make sure that we are in sync because again, I want to do no harm. And if we are, I think I'm going to experiment with doing it because if there's trust and respect between the two mediators to where you can then agree, you're going to do this, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
It could be a very interesting technique if used like the right tool in the right situation.
Mhm, mhm. Well, yeah, I absolutely agree with that. It's interesting to see the different styles. And, I also have heard about co-mediation when you've got diverse parties, and to have a man and a woman or to have somebody who's black and somebody who's white, if that can sometimes really. But I loved what you said too about, the school shooters. I mean, I think my wife would roll her eyes if I started to say, well, mediation, all we have to do is listen and, we can solve all of the problems of the school shooting. But I do think that there is in society, there's just kind of an us versus them orientation. And I love holding the calm. I think that that's a radical proposition. And as a mantra, it's a great way for us to think about what we do. But I think it's a radically transformative thing to think about who are the curators of that calm in society, because it seems like we're kind of on the back foot right now. And I love what you were talking about. We need more empathy. We need more connection. We need to have more people that take these skills and use them. I think Bernie Mayer has talked about how conflict specialists like us, when a firefighter sees, when somebody sees a fire, they usually run the other way, but a firefighter runs into the fire. If somebody barfs, other people run away, but a doctor says, hey, okay, how can I help you? What's going on? We have to also have that instinct too. We have to train ourselves. When you see that, when you see a disruption, we need to learn to intervene. And that's what I think your book is sort of pitching. I don't know. Is that kind of what you're trying to articulate in the social side?
I like it because I get involved all the time, but I'm a grandmother now. So I feel like I have the latitude. And that's just what I do. But I'm in just regular, normal things and I'll see a problem and I'll just walk up and say, can I help? It seems like there's a lot of frustration or hurt here. Can I help? And it's never turned down. I mean, someone may say, well, we're okay. And I say, okay, but then I'll be subtly voxing them.
Yeah.
And just help it calm down. I intervene all the time. And I would say this to everyone listening. Let's say you're afraid and you don't really want to do it. Remember I told you about alignment of self-interest? I live by that. It's free practice for you. Before you practice on clients or your family, practice. And you want to do, you're going to laugh when I tell you I did this from 30 years ago. I went to the returns desk at Target and Walmart. I stood there and I watched. And people are angry, they're mad, they're lying, they're conniving.
They're primed to fight. Yeah, they think it's going to be a fight.
Much. And I just watched. And it was really interesting to me. I learned a lot. So if you get involved in situations because you've got skills, your skills are just going to get better and better and better. And just remember, Michael Jordan didn't even make his high school basketball team. And then he sat out in his parents' driveway, boom, 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 10,000 shots. And now look at him. So we got to do things 10,000 times. See, that's why we have a flat forehead, because we just smash it against the wall over and over again.
I love that. I love that. Well, I know we're getting short on time. Does anybody have any comments or questions that they want to ask Hesha?
Well, I do want to say,
Colin,
Ismail, please.
I'm sorry. Yeah, just a quick question, Hesha, and it has to do with the party who crosses the line of being demanding to become an abusive. So as a mediator, do I blame myself for getting there?
No, God knows. First of all, everyone has a different line. Somebody can say, you can call something abusive that someone else can say, I'm expressing my feelings. I'm asserting a boundary. I'm standing up for myself. And if someone grew up in an argumentative type family where you had to argue to survive, that's just normal to them. You have someone who grew up more timid, everything was calm and quiet, it could feel abusive. So I'm even cautious on the word. Now, there are situations where it's like the Supreme Court decision of pornography. They said, it's a naked lady. Is it art or is it porn? I know it when I see it, So you're basically using you as a litmus test. And what I would say is, I tell people, every once in a while, my husband will go out to dinner and a couple is espousing political views that are very difficult, and he'll reach under the table and grip my thigh. And I've had to train him. I can handle this. You don't have to be worried because my husband's an engineer. We've only been married 6 years. So I've had to, he's had to learn that I don't run away from that. I can handle it. And then it becomes an interesting conversation. So the antidote to what you raise is to develop your skill set more and more and more, that you can handle more and more and more difficult situations. And so, but let's do the advanced class. Let's say someone really is abusive. You lying, rotten piece of sack of crap, and they're doing it like that. It's not abusive to them, it's venting of their feelings. But I have to protect this person getting crapped on, right? So I may step in, and sometimes I'll always step in with my body and say, oh God, you're angry. Woo, baby, you are, and I may raise my voice because I want to reach with them. You are angry. Oh boy, let's talk about that. Why are you so mad? And all of a sudden, now they turn to look at me. They never listened to me, or he stole from me, or whatever it is. Now I got data. Now who's in charge of that interaction? Me. I have now taken it and I can bring it down. And in the end, often that other person will apologize and they'll say, I'm sorry. And they'll apologize. But if you go, follow the rules, you're not being nice, you can't be doing this, all you have done is lose the opportunity to do some healing in a terrible situation. And that's terrible. And then being able to have a conversation with that person afterwards, that I know you're angry and upset. I know it, but what's the outcome you want? Mm-hmm. When you give vent to your anger and frustration, do you think the other person listens, or do they just run away from you? Mm-hmm. Then I may tell them the story of a whole chapter in the book called Being the Grown-Up in the Room, or the story of these giant rams. That's a phenomenal story. I may tell them the story and they'll go, oh, I got to be the mature ram. I go, I'm asking you because you can do it. Right?
I'm buying the book only for that ram story, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other ones too. Yeah.
It makes it worth it.
Yeah. I think we've all had the experience when a party starts throwing fire at you. And if you can just take that and bring it in, and then you just extinguish the flames, it's like, I am the calm here. I'm the calm here. You can give it to me. You can give it to me, but I'm not going to burn up. You can. So I love that. I love
Isn't
that.
Great. It's so, when it lifts up, you get to go home and go, I can't believe, woo, woo, look at the job I get to do. I can't believe I get to do this for my work in the world. And I did want to make one comment.
Please.
We didn't talk about yet. John DeGroote is one of the funniest human beings. He's hilarious. And he's got all these witticisms. We should have a book club thing where you just talk about humor and the funny stuff. Because every time we talk, I laugh.
Well, I will say, Texas kids, growing up in Texas, you pick up a lot of that. I said, well, turn the sock inside out. I'm like, that sounds just like my uncle when he said that. So that's great. John, I want to give you full credit. Humor can do a lot in a mediation room too.
It can definitely lighten up the mood. Thank you for saying that, Hesha. But there are no analogies. It's just sort of how I see things. So that's it.
Well, there's the art and there's the science of mediation. And, some of it is, who are you? Are you funny? Are you smart? Are you dynamic? Are you a listener? That's we all bring that to the table. Well, I have to say, I loved this session. Hesha, thank you so much. John, thank you so much for bringing Hesha to us. I'm going to circulate this recording far and wide, and I'll share it with you too, Hesha. But thank you so much for this book. It's such a gift, and thank you for spending this hour with us. And anything we can do at Mediate to get you more of an audience for your wisdom, let's do it. So
I'm trying to get it out there. So anything anybody can do that wants to disseminate it, I am trying to get high tide raises all ships. And I will tell people on the holdingthecalm.com website, if they sign up for the email, which I don't sell the list, it's totally private, I've started doing 1 minute holding the calm tips.
Love it.
Basically, I do it whenever I'm dressed nice enough to do it.
You got such a nice background. Even if it was a sweatshirt, you'd still look fancy. I would also urge you to look at TikTok, because that's a hot place. And there's a younger generation that this is all new for. So that's a great place for those 1 minute videos. I think a lot of old people kind of say, well, I'll go do it on Instagram. No, think about TikTok. You would be amazing.
Great idea. Thanks, Colin. That's a great idea. I'll do it.
All right. Well, this is great. Thank you so much for taking the time, everyone. Great to see you. Have a wonderful weekend. And thanks again, Hesha and John. This was fantastic.
My pleasure.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, John.
Appreciate you.
All right.
Colin.
Thank you.
Bye now.